Hey guys, it's Greg with Apple Explained, and today we're going to explore the history of Safari. This topic won last week's voting poll, and if you didn't get to vote, make sure you're subscribed, that way the voting polls will show up right in your activity feed. Now, Safari is Apple's web browser that was released back in 2003 with macOS 10.3 Panther. But you might be wondering, what web browser did the Mac use before Safari was created? Well, it used Netscape Navigator, which was the most popular web browser at the time, thanks to a very special capability where text and graphics appeared on the screen simultaneously as the web page loaded. Now, that may not sound like a very special feature today, but earlier web browsers would stay completely blank until 100% of the web content loaded, which meant it could take up to 3 minutes just to load one web page. Netscape Navigator served as the Mac's default web browser until 1998, and what happened next was quite fascinating. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, he found the company in much worse financial shape than he expected, discovering they were just 90 days from bankruptcy, and those desperate times called for desperate measures. Steve Jobs initiated talks with Microsoft, the arch nemesis of Apple in those days, and tried working out an investment deal. You see, Apple had a long-running lawsuit that claimed Microsoft copied the look and feel of Windows from the Macintosh operating system. This gave Apple some leverage in negotiations by offering to drop the lawsuit if Microsoft invested in Apple. But there was another factor at play. Microsoft was in the middle of an antitrust fight over its forceful promotion of Internet Explorer, which was tarnishing Microsoft's image with consumers and could lead to an antitrust lawsuit from the US government. So it was actually in Microsoft's interest to negotiate a deal with Apple in order to keep them around as a competitor. As the deal took shape, 5 specific terms were agreed upon by both parties. First, Microsoft had to make a $150 million investment in non-voting Apple shares. This meant Microsoft didn't have any say in decisions Apple made despite being a large shareholder. Second, both Apple and Microsoft would establish patent cross-licensing, so any existing or future patents created within 5 years would be shared between both companies. Third, Microsoft would commit to creating Mac versions of Microsoft Office for a 5-year period with the same number of major releases as Windows. Fourth, Microsoft and Apple would collaborate on Java compatibility to strengthen its viability as a competitor. Fifth was that every Mac had to ship with Internet Explorer as the default web browser, and not many people were happy about that. But the blow was softened when Jobs clarified that users could change the default web browser back to Netscape Navigator, which still shipped with every Mac. So Internet Explorer served as the Mac's default web browser for 5 years until the deal with Microsoft expired in 2003. And this gave Apple the opportunity to introduce a web browser of their own. On January 7, 2003, at Macworld in San Francisco, Steve Jobs announced that Apple had developed their own web browser called Safari. It was based on Apple's internal variation of the KHTML rendering engine called WebKit. Apple released the first beta version for iOS 10 that day. A number of official and unofficial beta versions followed until version 1.0 was released on June 23, 2003. Safari was available as a separate download for macOS 10.2 Jaguar, but was included with the macOS 10.3 Panther release on October 24, 2003. Even with Safari as the default browser, Apple decided to keep Internet Explorer on the Mac as an alternative. The second version of Safari came just 2 years later and did something quite interesting. Thanks to debugging and optimization work done by Apple Safari developer Dave Hyatt, Safari 2 was the first web browser to pass the ACID 2 test. Now, ACID 2 was a test page created by the Web Standards Project to expose page rendering flaws in web browsers and other applications that rendered HTML. Its purpose was to encourage adoption of universal web development standards, so web developers didn't have to waste time tweaking their websites to display correctly across different browsers. Establishing a universal web standard was very important. Without it, the internet would have likely become fragmented into pockets of incompatible content, with certain websites only available to users who had the right browser. The ACID 2 test was targeted toward Internet Explorer in particular, since it didn't follow hardly any web standards at all, something that frustrated users and developers alike since it was prone to display web pages differently from other browsers. This forced web developers to spend extra time tweaking their web pages in order to display correctly on Internet Explorer. But Microsoft dismissed ACID 2, describing the test as a wish list of features rather than a true test of standards compliance. But over time, more browsers began passing the test, and pressure mounted on Microsoft to do the same, which they eventually did with Internet Explorer 8 in 2007, 2 years after Safari. In addition to passing the ACID 2 test, Safari 2 featured a 1.8 times speed boost over the previous version. On January 9, 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone. It was the first time Safari was available on a mobile device, and later that year, Apple announced Safari 3, which was the first version available on Windows. During the announcement, Jobs ran a benchmark comparing the most popular Windows browsers, with Safari coming out on top. This is when Apple began claiming that Safari was the world's fastest browser. Later, third-party tests would confirm Apple's claim that Safari 3 was the fastest browser on the Windows platform. But this was in terms of initial data downloading over the internet. It was found to be only a hair faster than Internet Explorer 7 and Mozilla Firefox when loading static content from local cache. Beginning with Safari 4, the address bar had been completely revamped. The blue inline progress bar was replaced with a spinning bezel with a loading indicator. The button to add a bookmark was attached to the address bar by default, and the reload stop button was superimposed on the right end of the address bar. All of these changes were made to streamline the interface and make Safari appear similar to the mobile version on the iPhone. Safari 4 also included new features like cover flow for browsing history and bookmarks, top sites with a nice thumbnail view, improved developer tools, and a Nitro JavaScript engine that ran JavaScript up to 8 times faster than Internet Explorer. Safari 4 also passed the new ACID 3 web standards test. Apple released Safari 5 on June 7, 2010, featuring the new Safari Reader for reading articles on the web without distraction and a 30% JavaScript performance increase over Safari 4. Safari 5 included more than a dozen new HTML5 technologies with a focus on interoperability, and for the first time, developers could create Safari extensions to customize and enhance the browsing experience. Apple also decided to reintegrate the progress bar back into the address bar for this release, and that's something I vividly remember since I was so happy to have that feature back. Safari 6 was initially planned as a Safari 5.2 release until Apple announced the change to 6 at its 2012 Worldwide Developers Conference. The release of Safari 6 coincided with the OS X Mountain Lion release on July 25, 2012, and it was directly integrated into the OS. This meant Safari was no longer available for download from Apple's website. Mac users running OS X Lion could upgrade to Safari 6 through a software update, but it wasn't available for earlier operating systems, and it also wasn't available on Windows. Apple said, Safari 6 is available for Mountain Lion and Lion. Safari 5 continues to be available for Windows. Safari 6 included some helpful features like iCloud tabs, which synced users' open web tabs across their iOS and OS X devices. Safari 6 also included new privacy features, including an Ask Websites Not to Track Me preference, and the ability for websites to send Mountain Lion users notifications. Safari 7 was released in 2013 and brought improvements to JavaScript performance and memory usage, as well as a new look for top sites and the sidebar. There was a new shared links feature and a new power saver feature which paused plugins that weren't in use. The next two updates weren't very big. Safari just included WebGL support, stronger privacy features, increased speed and efficiency, enhanced iCloud integration, and an updated design. And Safari 9 in 2015 featured the ability to mute and pin tabs. But in 2016, Apple made up for the last two updates with Safari 10. It added a slew of new capabilities to Safari. There was Apple Pay, picture-in-picture support for video, a new bookmarks sidebar, a redesigned history and bookmarks view, site-specific zoom where Safari would remember how far you zoomed into websites, improved autofill, reader improvements, and the ability to reopen recently closed tabs. But with all those new features, you may wonder what else Apple could possibly add in the next version. Well, in Safari 11, Apple added some of my favorite features. First was the end of auto-playing videos. Safari would prevent videos from playing until you actually clicked the play button, which is how all videos on the internet should work. But the best addition was intelligent tracking prevention. This prevented websites from installing tracking cookies onto your browser and following you around the internet. The feature was very difficult to implement, and major advertising groups objected to it, saying the feature would reduce the free services supported by advertising, while other experts praised the change. Now everything we've covered so far is for the desktop version of Safari, but there are some features in iOS that I want to go over next. Starting with iOS 1, Safari had the unique ability to bookmark links as web clip icons on the home screen, which acted as shortcuts to certain websites. You could also press on an image for 3 seconds to save it to your photo album. In iOS 4, the Find function was built right into the search box, and users could print a web page with AirPrint. iOS 5 added true tabbed browsing similar to the desktop version, but only for iPads. Something called Reading List was also added, which allowed users to save articles for later, and this list would sync across all the user's devices. And Reader, not to be confused with Reading List, would organize all the text and images on a website into a more readable format while removing all the website's advertising. Finally, private browsing was added, which prevented cookies or web history from being saved. In iOS 6, iCloud tabs were added, just like in the desktop version, and offline reading lists meant users could read articles previously stored without an internet connection. Full screen landscape view for iPhone and iPod Touch users hid most of Safari's controls in order to see more web content. iOS 7 featured a redesigned icon and interface, a 64-bit build on devices using the A7 processor, iCloud Keychain which saved passwords, usernames, and credit card numbers, a password generator, shared links, tracking prevention, parental controls, an increase in the tab limit from 9 to 36, and a unified smart search field. In iOS 8, a search function was added to browse through all open tabs, a new sidebar would slide in to reveal bookmarks, the reading list, and shared links, the address bar would automatically hide while scrolling down, Spotlight search was made available for the address bar, a scan credit card option was offered while entering credit card information on a website, you could enable private browsing for a specific tab, an option to request the desktop version of a website was available, and holding the new tab button would show recently closed tabs. iOS 9 added content blocking extensions to restrict specific web content, Safari View Controller allowed web content to be displayed from within an app, and an improved Reader View allowed users to choose different fonts and themes while reading an article. iOS 10 increased the tab limit again, this time from 36 to 500, and finally, iOS 11 didn't really change much with Safari, but it did feature a rounder search bar. So that is the history of Safari. Let me know what features you guys would like to see in the next version, and if you want to vote for the next video topic, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.